Hey guys, so I know what you're thinking. The title, it says in defense of the movie, and I know, let me explain this. Hopefully you hear me out in this video and you watch the whole video and understand where I'm coming from, and I think this is going to be a very important conversation for us to have for my channel. Actually, as of right now, filming this video, I have no idea what channel I'm even uploading to because this could go either way. I originally wanted to put all of my true crime kind of content onto my horror channel because it's kind of related, but then I was thinking, you know, I did the serial killer tattoo video over on my main channel, so should I just stick to my main channel for my true crime content? So it's still kind of up in the air right now. Now, I think a lot of people expected me to hate this movie, come on here, talk about how it's so bad and why they should never have done it and blah, blah, blah. I did do a video similar to that for The Haunting of Sharon Tate over on my horror channel, and I think people expected a similar reaction to this movie because it is a fictional movie based on a real life killer. But what you have to understand is there is such thing as a gray area when it comes to this kind of stuff. It doesn't have to be all of it's offensive or none of it is. It does not have to be that black and white. You know, I talk about the fine line a lot of enjoying true crime content within reason and then not exploiting it for entertainment purposes. I make these videos coming out here saying how bad it is to romanticize serial killers. I will stand by those videos 100%. So I don't want to come across as hypocritical because I defend a movie that portrays a real life killer, because not all of them are done poorly in my opinion. And I do think it's important to have the conversation about the gray area because I do enjoy true crime content. I'm not sitting here saying all of it is terrible. It really is a case-by-case basis. So just hear me out in this video and, you know, feel free to share your opinion down below. And do keep in mind that this whole video, of course, is my opinion. If you don't agree with it, that's fine. If you want to disagree with me in the comments, perfect. Love a conversation. Just be respectful because I'm going to be respectful. So now I did do a react video to the trailer of Extremely Wicked. I'm just going to shorten it to Extremely Wicked. I'm not going to call it the whole title because it's so long, but the Ted Bundy, Zac Efron movie that we all know about on Netflix. I did a react video to the trailer over on my horror channel. That's another reason why I was still like, which channel do I upload this onto? So who knows where it'll end up, but basically I did that react to the trailer video over on my horror channel, and I was really nervous because, well, you can watch that video if you want to know like all of my thoughts about the trailer, but to summarize, I was nervous about the movie because they did portray, in the first trailer anyway, because there were two, the first one they released made it seem like a dramatic rom-com, I was gonna say rom-com, it's not a comedy, dramatic romance film with a little crime in there, like a little heist movie with a side of romance. And of course, that's not reality. That's not really what took place. It's not this like kooky story drama with some romance. I mean, maybe it was, we weren't there, but I assume it was not that lighthearted, upbeat kind of plot of him like getting away and killing women. So then after I posted that react video, a lot of people were posting in the comments saying, well, it's actually, the movie is portrayed from Liz's perspective, Ted Bundy's girlfriend at the time of his crimes when he was arrested. And then it made sense because this whole entire movie is done from her perspective. So of course we're gonna see him through her eyes, which was the romantic kind of guy. So this did end up being more of a dramatic movie than what I think other people were expecting, like a thriller or even a horror movie. I, you know, assume that some people were kind of expecting something like that, given that he was one of the most gruesome and notorious serial killers in history. And I think that's why everyone is saying that they hate this movie so much because, sorry about my neighbors walking around upstairs, they are quite loud. Of course, they have to be so active today. Anyway, I think that's really why people said that they didn't like this movie. A lot of people hated this film, and I think a lot of people, when they were DMing me, expected me to hate it too, and were kind of projecting that onto me because they just assumed that I would hate it given the context of the movie. So those were the two things that I knew going into the movie before I had even seen it, was that everyone hated it, and I was like, here we go. And then also that it was going to be from the perspective of his girlfriend, so it wasn't going to be an objective viewpoint of his actual crimes and from the court system and from that perspective, it was going to be from her eyes. So knowing these things going into the film, it was easy for me to forgive a lot of the beginning of the movie where they portray him as this charming, romantic man, because that is literally how she saw him. She did not know the things that we knew watching the film, which I think made it even more disturbing because we knew what was coming and she didn't. So this movie doesn't really take a serious turn until towards the end of the film. So the first like half to three quarters of the movie is kind of a romantic drama, like heist movie. These two lovers torn apart by the justice system. But of course we know the truth. I think that's why a lot of people had an issue with this film. That, and also there were no real murders or reenactments of his murders in the movie. But to me, that's a great thing, guys. I think they're finally leaving. Jesus Christ. Nope, they're not. To me, that's a selling point, that they were able to take this story, make it a really disturbing movie while showing how the media portrayed him and how women like Liz viewed him, because we cannot forget that that is reality of this situation when it happened back in the day. He was this charming person, and that is why so many women flocked to him, all while knowing he was a killer. Some believed he was innocent, and that is why a lot of people did think he was innocent, because he was so convincing and manipulative as a person, that, you know, he was so cocky about him, like his ego was just so big. That's why he ended up representing himself in the trial towards the end, and that is why people believed he was innocent and why women loved him. So that is reality. What they showed in the movie in those scenes is real. So that is why this movie and the perspective of this movie and the way they portrayed him is highly accurate and therefore not offensive to me, because they didn't exploit the victims of the crimes by recreating every murder, every gory detail. We did not need that in this movie. So I think maybe they didn't market the movie properly, because a lot of people were expecting this like objective memoir almost from the, you know, court perspective, or just like an objective telling of his stories through Zac Efron being Ted Bundy, you know? But instead we got kind of a romantic drama that ended really disturbing and not a lot of action or gore. And I think what really saves this movie is the last 20 to 30 minutes, because that is where it highlights how manipulative and how disturbing Ted Bundy as a human really was. So instead of showing his actual like reenactments of his murders, they described them in the court. And I think, well, a couple things, a couple details, and some of them are very disturbing to even just listen to. So I don't think we needed reenactments of them, to be honest, because they are just so terrifying to me, and that would have been exploitative of the victims that were actually murdered. I think just explaining some of the gory details in the courtroom while Ted Bundy is like, I didn't do that. That is disturbing, and that is reality. I think that is a good reality check for the viewer to remind us like, hey, he really did commit these horrible crimes, lest we forget. For a long time in the movie, they did kind of portray him as a sympathetic character, and I think that's another reason why people were upset about that. But we have to remember this is still through Liz's eyes. He was that genuine, he was that manipulative in real life throughout his trial, and I'm sure to an extent Liz believed him on some level, and so that's what they wanted the viewer to feel, is like, did he do it? Like, they wanted us to look at him and question it, because that is what was going on at the time of his court case and everything as it was going on. And I think that's why some of the women, like I said before, flocked to him, because they did genuinely believe he was innocent. The final scenes were really subtle in showing how much of a master manipulator and like scary individual he was. They were subtle, but they were there, and to me they were effective. Like, I had chills through one of the scenes. Although they do portray him as somewhat of a sympathetic character throughout some of the movie, you don't leave the movie rooting for Bundy still. You don't wish that this love story worked out between Liz and him. No. I left the movie feeling so sorry for the victims that were affected by him, and also for Liz and what she avoided ultimately, and what could have happened to her and what she went through, and, you know, exposing her child to someone like that. And you see her realize these details of like, he was with my daughter. Like, you know, the creators walked a fine line between portraying him as a monster killer and also as this charming man that women lusted after, because in reality he was somewhere in between. I was worried when I saw who they cast as Ted Bundy, you know, casting Zac Efron, who is a well-loved person, highly attractive. Obviously women love him, and I was worried that that this movie would encourage people to romanticize possibly the most romanticized killer already existing. But honestly, after seeing the movie and seeing that they portrayed it through the media's eyes and through Liz's eyes, I don't think that this movie does that. I don't think, like I said, we leave the movie, you know, thinking highly of Bundy or anything like that. Now, there's also a fine line. There's a lot of fine lines in true crime, right? There's a fine line between showing too little of his crimes though, and then thus creating more of a sympathetic character because we aren't seeing the reality of what his crimes really were. So there's that fine line of showing too little and then showing too much, exploiting the victims. I think personally it danced somewhere on the side of too little, showing a little bit too little of the actual gory details. I know I said that they do show enough subtleties and like kind of explain his crimes a little bit to give us, as a viewer, a reality check. But I think it's still a little bit too little. But at the same time, I respect that they chose to show as little as they did. I think what happens in the end when Liz finally realizes that he's guilty and he kind of admits it to her, which I'm not gonna give away details in case you haven't seen it, but that moment where he kind of, you know, tells her essentially what, I mean, with one word, just tells her everything she needs to know. And I think that scene alone is so powerful in showing who he really was, because up until that point, although we knew the truth because we know mostly the story around Ted Bundy, up until that point they kind of portrayed him in a different way of like, you know, this cocky, egotistical, manipulative person who might be innocent. You know, obviously we know he's not, but like they're kind of portraying him in this way that he's like defending himself to the grave, like he will not stop defending and not plead guilty, you know, etc. But then finally kind of admits it to Liz, and that moment is just so scary, and then it's like it all comes crashing down at that point. And I think, like I said, it was just a powerful, powerful scene. But I do think that this movie provided a little bit more of a different perspective than what we're used to, because there's tons and tons of documentary series on him and just movies and everything like that. But to have this based on the book that Liz wrote in real life, like his real life girlfriend wrote this book, and to have a movie portraying it from that perspective, I think is a new take on Ted Bundy, and it was really fascinating to see it from that side. The last thing I think it did to redeem itself in this movie is the end credits, where they're actually showing footage of Ted Bundy, and line for line is repeating what was just said in the movies. So that tells me that a lot of what they did portray as far as in the trial was pretty accurate. Also listing out the known victims of Ted Bundy in the final kind of scene of the movie was really important, and I'm glad that they did that. So regardless of how we walked away from the movie or how we felt about it, we don't forget what this story, who this story is really about. And I think that paired with the actual footage of him in court reminded the viewer that this is not just a movie. This is not a fictional tale retold. This is reality. This happened. There are real victims involved, including Liz. So I do understand the argument that it does sometimes kind of glorify Bundy and like how he escaped and things like that, and are kind of highlighting his crimes in a way that could be seen as glorifying, given that he's so cunning and manipulative. But isn't that what they wanted to portray? Because that is how a lot of people viewed him back in the day when all this was happening. So all of that being said, just because I defended the movie does not mean that I actually liked it as a movie. Now I know we're taking a 180 here. So one thing that it did completely wrong, in my opinion, and there's just no defending it and no saving it, is that they, during the trial and everything, they focused so much on the details of this and less on his psyche, and basically not at all on his psyche or his mental health, which is obviously a huge part in this. So this movie definitely lacks a lot of depth when it comes to the subject of mental illness as it relates to his crimes, so that was a little bit disappointing. I expected something to be focused on his mental health, although I could argue that you do kind of see him start to unravel towards the end, but not to the extent that they could have shown. I think that is something that they could have highlighted more. But then again, in reality, he wasn't that, you know, showing or telling of what his mental illness issues were. So it's hard when it's through Liz's perspective and the media's to show and portray that in that way. So I kind of understand why they didn't show too much about it, but I do wish that they focused a little bit more on his psyche and what was actually going on with him and in his head than what they did. But given the perspective, I don't know if they could have done that. Now, did they show enough for the general audience to be able to understand fully the brutality of Bundy's crimes? And I think there's gonna be a lot of people that disagree on this because they didn't show much. They showed a reenactment of one murder, but of course not any gory details or anything that disturbing about it. And although it was subtle, there were other instances where they do kind of explain it, but again, not showing it, they just kind of explain it. And I think if you already knew the backstory, you would be able to pick up on a lot of the details that kind of capture who Bundy really was. But I don't think that that's something that they should have relied on, because just, you know, expecting a lot of people to already know about Ted Bundy's situation, his story and his crimes and murders and everything, that's not a good crutch to have, you know? And I think that's kind of a downfall for this movie because it felt like it was almost made for, strictly for true crime fans who already know the details about this, because they don't really explain a lot about him and the murders. So my little review of the movie is that everyone did a great job. Of course, there's a lot of great acting in it. Everyone was cast really well, I think. However, one of the things that I saw a lot of people complaining about is how slow paced the movie was and how boring it was. And I do kind of have to agree with this to an extent. I did think it was going to be a little bit faster paced, so I do agree that it was pretty slow and probably not what a lot of people were expecting. But personally, if I was going to have a fictional movie about Ted Bundy, I'd much rather it be boring than exploitative. Like I said before, it's okay to disagree with me. I just wanted to have the conversation that not everything is black and white when it comes to serial killer, true crime content. Even fictional movies can be done properly and appropriately. So that's why I just wanted to come on here and give my 2 cents on the Extremely Wicked movie, because, well, a lot of y'all asked me to. But also I think it's a good opportunity for me to explain that it is a nuanced topic and it's okay to like a fictional movie that is based on a real serial killer. It's just whether or not it exploits the victims. Some movies get it so wrong, like The Haunting of Sharon Tate starring Hilary Duff. Watch my review on that. That movie is just so terrible on so many levels. So obviously it is a balance. It is a fine line to really understand how to portray it in a way that is reality without having to exploit what the actual murders were or the actual events that took place. Another movie I thought did okay at this was My Friend Dahmer. I think a lot of people just expect me to hate all serial killer everything because I've been so vocal about romanticizing killers. And yeah, there is kind of an issue with casting generally attractive people in these roles, and that might encourage people to romanticize them further. Zac Efron, at the end of the day, did resemble Ted Bundy. So Ross Lynch did resemble young Jeffrey Dahmer, and there's just, we can't ignore that fact and just cast ugly people in these roles just to prevent it, because that is not what is real. So I know this video is going to be very shocking to so many of you, but I hope that you understand my perspective. I hope you watched it all the way through to understand what I think this movie got right and what it got wrong. What it got wrong, I think, was pretty wrong, but generally I think they did okay. It's not a great movie, I don't love it, but I didn't hate it from a serial killer, like true crime perspective of exploiting the victims. I don't think it did that. So I know a lot of you are going to have some strong opinions about this, and I would love for you to share them in the comments. But like I said in the beginning, please be respectful and just respect everyone's opinion. And yeah, that's basically it. Those are my thoughts on the Ted Bundy, Zac Efron Netflix film Extremely Wicked. Shockingly evil and vile. I had to say it one time. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.